Imagine a world of shifting sands, treacherous mountain passes, and the relentless clash of steel. This isn't just history. This is an epic saga of survival, ambition, and the birth of one of the greatest dynasties the world has ever seen, the Mughal Empire. But before the gold and the grand palaces, there was a young boy with a kingdom lost and a dream that stretched across the Himalayas. This is the story of Zahir-ud-Din Muhammad Babur, a descendant of both Genghis Khan and Tamerlane, who faced impossible odds to redefine the map of South Asia forever. For the American audience, fascinated by the rise and fall of great powers, the story of Babur is the ultimate underdog narrative. It begins in the rugged valleys of Fergana in modern-day Uzbekistan. At only 12 years old, Babur inherited a throne he couldn't hold. Surrounded by ambitious uncles and fierce rivals, he spent his youth as a wanderer, a prince without a palace, sleeping under the stars and dreaming of a legacy. But destiny had a different plan for him. While he looked toward Samarkand with longing, the riches and the mysteries of the Indian subcontinent were calling his name. The journey from the cold mountains of Central Asia to the humid plains of India was not just a geographic shift, it was a desperate gamble. Babur was a military genius who understood that the old ways of warfare were changing. He was among the first to bring gunpowder and cannons to a land ruled by massive elephant corps. As he crossed the Indus River, he wasn't just a conqueror, he was a visionary. He knew that to build something lasting, he had to challenge the mighty Delhi Sultanate, led by Ibrahim Lodi. The year was 1526, and the stage was set at Panipat. This wasn't just another battle, it was a collision of eras. On one side stood an army of 100,000 soldiers and 1,000 war elephants. On the other, Babur stood with a much smaller force, but he had a secret weapon, tactical brilliance, and the roar of artillery. The air was thick with tension as the sun rose over the plains. For Babur, it was everything or nothing. If he failed, his name would be a footnote in history. If he succeeded, he would lay the foundation for a legacy that would produce the Taj Mahal and change world culture forever. The strategy was simple, yet revolutionary, the tulugma. By circling the enemy and using his cannons with devastating precision, Babur turned the strength of the Lodi army against itself. The chaos was absolute. The elephants, terrified by the thunder of gunpowder, turned back on their own ranks. In a matter of hours, the Delhi Sultanate crumbled, and the gates to India swung wide open. But winning the battle was only the beginning. Babur now faced a land that was as beautiful as it was hostile, filled with rebellious Rajputs and a climate that tested his very soul. He didn't just want to loot, he wanted to stay. He began to transform the dry landscape with Persian-style gardens, bringing the concept of charbagh to India. This blend of cultures, the rugged bravery of the steppes and the refined elegance of Persia, became the DNA of the Mughal identity. Babur's memoirs, the Baburnama, give us a rare, intimate look into his mind, his love for nature, his struggles with homesickness, and his unwavering resolve. He was a poet-warrior, a man who could write delicate verses one moment and lead a cavalry charge the next. As we dive deeper into this first chapter of the Mughal legacy, we see a man who never gave up, even when he lost everything multiple times. His story is a testament to the power of persistence. From the narrow streets of Kabul to the throne of Delhi, Babur's footsteps paved the way for a century of splendor. This was the spark that ignited the Mughal flame, a flame that would burn brightly for over 300 years, influencing art, architecture, and the very fabric of modern India.
The victory at Panipat was just the beginning. For many conquerors, taking the throne is the easy part. holding it is where the real story begins. Babur now stood as the master of Delhi, but he was a stranger in a strange land. The heat of the Indian plains was stifling compared to the cool breezes of Kabul, and his own soldiers were homesick, exhausted, and on the verge of mutiny. They had seen the riches of India, and many wanted to take the gold and retreat to the mountains. But Babur, with the charisma of a true leader, gave a legendary speech that echoed through the camps. He told them that a kingdom is not built on retreat, but on the courage to stay and build a home. However, the greatest threat wasn't internal. To the west, the formidable Rajput Confederacy was gathering under the leadership of the legendary Rana Sanga of Mewar. This wasn't just another rival. Rana Sanga was a warrior who had survived countless battles, bearing the scars of 80 wounds on his body. The upcoming clash at Kanwa in 1527 would determine whether the Mughals were just another passing wave of invaders or the new masters of India. The atmosphere was grim. Babur's astrologers predicted defeat, and his men were terrified by the stories of Rajput bravery. In a dramatic move to inspire his troops, Babur broke his precious gold and silver wine goblets, vowing never to drink again, and declared a holy war for the survival of his vision. The Battle of Kanwa was a turning point in world history. Once again, Babur's tactical genius and his expert use of the araba, wagon line defense, proved decisive. Despite being heavily outnumbered, the Mughal artillery shattered the traditional cavalry charges of the Rajputs. By evening, the power of the Rajput Confederacy was broken, and Babur's position in India was finally secure. This victory shifted the narrative. Babur was no longer just a king of Kabul raiding the plains. He was now the emperor of Hindustan. But he didn't stop at military conquest. He began laying the administrative roots that would sustain his descendants for generations. Even as he consolidated power, Babur remained a man of deep intellect and nostalgia. He missed the muskmelons of his homeland and the flowing streams of Fergana. To combat his homesickness, he began an ambitious project of molding the Indian landscape. He introduced the concept of the Char Bagh, 4-part symmetrical gardens, which became the blueprint for future Mughal wonders like the Humayun's tomb and the Taj Mahal. He was an emperor who looked at the world through the eyes of a poet, documenting the flora and fauna of India with scientific precision in his memoirs. But the toll of constant warfare and the harsh climate began to weigh on him. In the final years of his reign, his focus shifted toward his eldest son, Humayun. The bond between father and son led to one of the most touching legends in Mughal history. When Humayun fell dangerously ill, it is said that Babur performed a ritual, walking around his son's bed and praying to the Almighty to take his own life in exchange for his son's health. Whether by miracle or coincidence, Humayun recovered as Babur's health rapidly declined. In 1530, at the age of 47, the founder of the Mughal Empire passed away, leaving behind a fragile but revolutionary legacy. Babur's life was a masterclass in resilience. He started as a displaced prince and ended as the architect of a new world order. He taught his successors that to rule India, one must understand its soul, respect its diversity, and bring something new to the table. His body was eventually taken back to his beloved Kabul to rest in a garden under the open sky, just as he had wished. But the empire he ignited was now a roaring fire. The crown was passed to Humayun, who inherited a kingdom surrounded by enemies, setting the stage for the next dramatic chapter of the Mughal Odyssey.
As the dust settled on the battlefields of northern India, Babur's vision was no longer just a dream. It was a reality carved in stone and soil. But the true measure of a leader isn't just how they conquer, but what they leave behind. Babur didn't just leave a throne, he left a blueprint for a multicultural empire. He was the bridge between the nomadic traditions of Central Asia and the sophisticated urbanity of India. For the American viewers who value innovation and grit, Babur stands as a symbol of the ultimate pioneer, a man who lost everything but gained a world through sheer willpower and a forward-thinking mindset. In his final days, Babur was more than a warrior. He was a statesman, deeply concerned about the future. He left behind a set of instructions for his son Humayun that were remarkably ahead of his time. He advised his heir to be tolerant of all religions, to respect the customs of the local people, and to administer justice with an even hand. These principles would later become the backbone of the empire's greatest era under his grandson Akbar. Even as he felt his strength fading, his mind remained sharp, reflecting on the fleeting nature of power and the permanence of art and knowledge. The transition from Babur to Humayun was a moment of extreme vulnerability for the young empire. The Afghan lords and the kings of Bengal were watching, waiting for any sign of weakness. When Babur breathed his last in Agra, the Mughal experiment was at a crossroads. Could this new dynasty survive without its charismatic founder? Humayun stepped into shoes that were nearly impossible to fill. He inherited a treasury that was nearly empty from constant wars, and a court filled with ambitious brothers who had their own eyes on the peacock throne. The stage was set for a roller coaster of triumphs and tragedies that would define the next generation. Babur's impact on history goes beyond boundaries. He introduced a new style of architecture that blended Persian elegance with Indian craftsmanship, a style that would eventually give the world some of its most iconic landmarks. His use of the Persian language in administration and courtly life created a rich, synthetic culture that influenced music, food, and literature for centuries. He was the first great Mughal, and though his time in India was short, only 4 years, he changed the course of history more than many who ruled for decades. As we wrap up this first chapter of our series, we look back at the boy from Fergana who dared to cross the mountains. He was a man of contradictions, a ruthless conqueror who wept at the sight of a familiar fruit, a king who preferred a garden tent to a stone palace, and a father who supposedly gave his life for his son. His story tells us that empires are built on more than just swords. They are built on character, adaptability, and the courage to embrace the unknown. But the Mughal story is far from over. The flame that Babur lit was now in the hands of Humayun, a man of stars and science, but one who lacked his father's iron grip. Ahead lay years of exile, betrayal, and a dramatic comeback that would test the very survival of the Mughal name. In our next video, we will dive into the chaotic and fascinating reign of Humayun and the rise of his formidable rival, Sher Shah Suri. The foundations are laid, the kingdom is set, but the real test of the Mughals has only just begun. Stay tuned as the saga of the world's most opulent empire